As Americans, we've been conditioned to hate our neighbors because, quite frankly, class solidarity is a threat to the ruling class. If you're too busy fighting your neighbors because you think that they're the root cause to all of your problems, you might not notice who the real enemy is. So elites deliberately pit us against each other to distract us while they rub us blind. It really is as simple as the classic meme of the elitist with a plate of cookies convincing the worker with one cookie that the immigrant is trying to take his only cookie. Although I think that this version of the meme is probably more apt these days. Or, as Mamdani eloquently put it, they're trying to convince somebody who's making $30 an hour that the guy making $20 an hour is who he should hate. And their scapegoating of minorities is not subtle. And I say that because on November 20th, DHS tweeted out a list of societal problems ranging from housing to healthcare to the cost of groceries. And as you can see, no matter the issue, immigrants were always to blame according to them. But Representative Pramila Jayapal retorted by crossing out immigrants and replacing them with billionaires, rightfully so. Now, there were basically three different responses to Jayapal's post. There were lefties who thought that it was based, there were neo-Nazis who said, actually it's Jewish people, and there were centrists who smugly claimed that her post validated horseshoe theory and argued that both sides are equally dumb and have an overly simplistic worldview. Now, is Jayapal analysis simplistic? Yes, like that was the purpose of her tweet. She's countering propaganda put out by the Trump regime. But nonetheless, what she's saying is still objectively true. Immigrants and minorities are not responsible for all of society's problems like they want you to believe, whereas almost every single crisis that we are experiencing is a direct result of billionaires and multinational corporations either lobbying or buying off politicians and rigging the rules against the rest of us. You don't have free healthcare or a living wage or a union or affordable housing because elites paid the government to not give you those things so they can make money off of those things and profit off of your pain and suffering. It really is a zero-sum game because there's only a finite amount of resources to go around. So teaching Americans to hate billionaires is important, not only because they're justified in hating these leeches, but because it helps foster class solidarity among working people, which never really existed in this country in significant ways. It's not like we would suddenly live in a utopia if we Thanos snapped billionaires out of existence, right? Because the real enemy really is the capitalist system itself, which allowed billionaires to exist in the first place. But just getting Americans to direct their anger towards elites who are hoarding all of the resources as opposed to, say, innocent immigrants, that is a political necessity if we are ever going to beat fascism, because that right there is how you facilitate meaningful change. You have to have class solidarity. Billionaires are manifestations of our late-stage capitalist system, and if you're viewing them as the common enemy, you're just one step away from having class solidarity and understanding the issues with the system itself. And just think about it this way. The right's answer creates more societal problems, whereas the left's answer solves society's problems, as simplistic as it may sound to centrists. Because if you believe that immigrants are the problem, what do? Well, you deport them. Then you're not just destroying their lives, you're taking away hard-working taxpayers who contribute to their local economies. It's a net negative, objectively speaking, for everybody involved. Whereas if you believe that billionaires are the problem, the policy solution then is to have, say, a 10% wealth tax to fund education and universal pre-K, which would then be a net positive to communities. And if you take it a step further, and you eliminate billionaires, and you redistribute resources to the rest of society, imagine all of the other things that we can do with that money to help regular working class people. But we've been conditioned to think that rich people have to have everything because that wealth is going to trickle down to us one day. So it's actually good that they're getting money because it's going to benefit us. You know, as right-wing economist Peter Schiff put it, if you want to help the poor, then lower taxes on the rich. What helps the poor is a productive economy that makes goods and services more abundant and less expensive while creating employment opportunities. The capital investment that makes that possible comes from the rich. Now, multimillionaire CEO Ramit Sethi responded to this saying, "I'm rich and this is a lie. When politicians lower my taxes, I don't create additional jobs. Only demand does that. I simply save that money. Trickle-down economics has been repeatedly debunked, yet conservatives lie to you so they can give their wealthy overlords more tax cuts." And good on him for saying that as a wealthy person, because I do appreciate class traders so long as they're rich class traders, not working class bootlickers of the elites. But I feel like it's not even necessary to debunk trickle down in 2025 because most people with functioning brains already see it for the scam that it is. But if you accept Jayapal's premise, you implicitly acknowledge that the solution is to tax the rich and redistribute wealth. So I'm thankful that more Democrats are finally starting to understand that you have to teach people who the real common enemy is if you want them to stop falling for the right's divisive class warfare tactics, if you want them to stop falling for xenophobia and racism and transphobia and homophobia and all the phobias and isms. And if you're not already sold on Jayapal's premise, my goal in this video is to sell you on it. Because if I can get you to hate billionaires even just a little bit after you finish watching this, then I'll have accomplished my mission for today. And if you already hate billionaires, then I want to explain to you why you don't hate them enough. So I'm going to start with some just mind-blowing stats from Oxfam that demonstrates just how greedy these parasites are.
We've entered this new era that we're calling survival of the richest, where the ultra-wealthy are amassing fortunes like never seen before, frankly, because the economic system is rigged in their favor. Here's some data for you. The world's richest 1% since 2020 have captured nearly 2/3 of all new wealth created in the world. That's the richest 1% grabbing nearly twice as much money as the rest of humanity, the 99% of us put together. Meanwhile, 1.7 billion workers now live in countries in which inflation is outstripping wages, and you've got massive corporations raking in record profits. They're hiking prices, but also exploiting and driving inflation. And I think we're all feeling the impact of that at the cash register. The good news is that none of this is inevitable, that we can do something about this, and we can do a bunch of things, but a fundamental start is ensuring that the super wealthy pay their fair share in taxes. A wealth tax, for example, of up to 5% on the world's multimillionaires and billionaires, that could raise $1.7 trillion a year. That's enough to lift 2 billion people out of poverty and to fund a global plan to end hunger.
So if your only political analysis is tax the rich, redistribute wealth, as simple as that may be, it would drastically transform society because every dollar that they're hoarding could be used for the greater good. And it's not just about using that money to help people. It's about justice. It's about taking money back from them that they stole from their workers. And I say it was stolen because nobody can work hard enough to earn $1 billion. That's preposterous. Like, does anybody actually believe that Elon Musk, who sits on his ass tweeting all day, is working harder than any of his employees at any of his companies? Of course not. Him and his C-suite buddies, they pocket Tesla's profits while their employees barely get crumbs. But it's even worse than that because, as Oxfam points out, about 60% of billionaire wealth comes from one of three sources: inheritance, cronyism, and corruption or monopoly power. Trillions are being gifted in inheritance in particular, creating a new aristocratic oligarchy that has immense power in our politics and our economy. In 2023, for the first time, more new billionaires got rich through inheritance than through entrepreneurship. All of the world's billionaires younger than 30 inherited their wealth. The next 3 decades will see over 1,000 of today's billionaires transfer more than $5.2 trillion to their heirs. Oxfam calculates that 36% of billionaire wealth is derived from inheritance. Worse still, this transfer will be largely untaxed. Oxfam's analysis shows that 2/3 of countries don't tax inheritance to direct descendants at all. Half the world's billionaires live in countries with no inheritance tax on the money that they will give to their children when they die, which is absolutely outrageous and egregious. And in a global capitalist system, wealth equals power. So billionaires buy politicians and lobby the government to make sure that the rules never change, to make sure that there's never any laws that benefit workers like you in order for them to keep maximizing profits, to make sure that they never have to pay their fair share of taxes, so you're the one stuck with the bill for the public services that they also use. Their companies drive on our public roads and use our water and fire departments, all while they produce propaganda calling poor people leeches on the system, while they're the ones leeching off of the fucking system. It's incredibly ironic, isn't it? And mere talk of a wealth tax is enough to send these parasites into a fucking tizzy. Here's how one billionaire reacted back in 2020 to a 2% wealth tax proposed by Elizabeth Warren.
It's kind of obvious people can not only see the emotion on your face, but hear it in your voice when you talk about this, Lee. Why?
I care. That's it.
Families in America are going hungry and bankrupt due to medical bills, but a 2% wealth tax is too unfair because you just don't understand that they don't have billions in liquidity, so, they're going to be forced to sell assets and stocks to pay that tax bill. Yeah, we do understand, and that's kind of the point. And to add insult to injury, they cry victim when they're the ones victimizing the rest of society with their greed. Here's just a few examples as to how they're doing that. They stick you with their tax bill, as I pointed out earlier, and they force you to fund public services that they also benefit from, such as infrastructure and national defense. They destroy democracy by diluting our political power by lobbying and buying politicians who do their bidding. In fact, a 2014 Princeton University study found that Americans have no impact on policy outcomes because our entire government has become beholden exclusively to elites. On top of that, quote, billionaire demand for luxury housing is driving up the cost of land and housing construction, supercharging the already existing housing crisis. Billionaire speculators are buying up rental housing, single-family homes, and mobile home parks to squeeze more money out of the housing shortage. Global billionaires are coming to tax haven USA to park their money in U.S. farmland, timber, and housing. As I mentioned earlier, they're also inflaming existing divisions in society by buying up and or investing in partisan media to sow division and scapegoat black and brown people, as well as LGBTQ people and Muslims and immigrants. They're also destroying the planet, not just because of their individual CO2 emissions with excessive private jet usage and whatnot, but through the corporations they own that pollute, or through the investments in corporations that pollute. And as they profit off of the climate crisis, they're blocking action to mitigate the effects of climate change by disseminating climate denial propaganda and by buying politicians that won't rein them in. They're also literally making us more sick and profiting off of it, since billionaire-backed private equity firms are buying up hospitals and pharmaceutical companies and investing in private insurance companies that profit off of our corrupt healthcare system, and they disseminate more propaganda to fearmonger about the threat of socialized healthcare as well. And on top of that, they're even coming for your pets. Quote, billionaire private equity funds know we love our pets like family members and are sometimes willing to go into debt for their healthcare. To squeeze more money out of us, the billionaires are buying up veterinary care, medical specialties, pet food and supply, and even pet care services like Rover.com. They're even dictating what's on your food plate. The food barons, the billionaires that monopolize almost every sector of the food economy, are dictating the price, ingredients, and supply of most food. And guess what? Their goal isn't to provide Americans with balanced nutritional diets. It's to load food up with cheap filler ingredients that are addictive in order to maximize profits, because that's what it's about at the end of the day. Life is getting worse in so many different ways, specifically because billionaires are trying to find more ways to squeeze even more profits out of us. And we kind of just breezed by climate change, but it's really worth emphasizing that they are literally destroying the planet for short-term profits. And they know that that's what they're doing to make matters even worse. Like, ignorance is one thing, but they know that's what they're doing. And if all of us tried to get our net emissions down to zero, it still wouldn't be enough to save the planet, since just a small fraction of multinational corporations make up the lion's share of global greenhouse gas emissions. So they've decided for all of us that we just don't get to have a future with a habitable planet. And to make matters worse, as I stated earlier, they fund climate denial propaganda when they know damn well that climate change is real. Hence why billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg are gobbling up land from indigenous Hawaiians to build doomsday bunkers under their mansions, because they want to be able to insulate themselves from the climate crisis that they've created. And speaking of Zuckerberg, since billionaires like him have so much wealth, they're essentially taking over cities to maximize profits even more. For example, Meta is building a new data center in Louisiana that is the size of Manhattan. You heard that right. The data center is the size of Manhattan. And even though locals do not want that, Meta is running ads bragging about how much small towns love intrusive data centers that suck up all of their clean water and drive up electricity bills. Now, here's a breakdown from More Perfect Union. This is shocking, but nonetheless not surprising at all in this late-stage capitalist climate where billionaires just think they can do whatever the fuck they want.
We went to Holly Ridge, Louisiana, where Meta's new Manhattan-sized data center is being built. Meta's new ads claim these communities welcome data centers, but residents painted a very different picture.
We had no voting on it, no community meetings, no nothing. It was done all under the table, and when it was said and done, there was nothing nobody could do.
You're planning to leave?
I've been here 81 years. I can't stay here with nobody I can talk to. My mom has been out here all her life, 82 years. She's really not happy about it, but does want to leave too.
Do you think they care about the people that live here?
No,
I sure don't.
Residents emphasized the increased traffic violence from Meta's trucks. I dug through police reports and found a 600% increase in vehicle crashes on the roads surrounding Meta's construction site in the last 9 months.
The playground at the front of the school, they're not letting y'all play on that, right?
No. Meta trucks don't watch out. If they try to stop, they will. They wrecked into the gate, and that's why they're saying we shouldn't go out there and all that, because there's too many wrecks and Meta trucks, and they could crash. I really love that playground.
Do you wish you could play there?
Yes.
Residents also shared their distrust in the quality of their water and the lack of support from elected officials to address it.
My neighbor was washing my clothes and messed up a whole load of whites because it come out stained from that brown water.
Do you feel like it's safe to drink?
No, I buy water.
Have you heard anything about them addressing that?
No.
Have you gotten any information about the project at all from anybody?
None at all, except on the internet and on my Facebook.
How does this change what it's like to live here?
Just totally different. I mean, who wants to live like this?
Certainly not billionaires, which is why they build shit like this in your backyard and not theirs. And I came across this article from Realtor.com where they talk about how Jeff Bezos bought a third mansion on Bunker Island, which is near Miami Beach, just so he can stay there temporarily while they demolish the other 2 mega mansions that he bought back in 2023, so he can combine both of those properties into one mega mansion. And it is astonishing to me that he thinks that he's too good to even stay at the most luxurious hotel in the world. He can afford that, but he's like, no, I'm going to buy this mansion just so I can stay there temporarily while my castle gets built. Listen, until we eliminate global hunger and poverty and homelessness, there isn't a single person on the planet who should have this much wealth. But ask yourself, would rich assholes like Jeff Bezos be cool with a data center a mile away from them near, billionaire Bunker Island? Would they be okay with a fracking company in their backyard on Bunker Island? Would they even be okay with like a single family home, just one single family home for a middle-class family on Bunker Island where the billionaires are? Of course they wouldn't. They're cultivating private little spaces for themselves away from the consequences of their actions that they're forcing the rest of us to live with. And to go back to Zuckerberg, he drove Native Hawaiians off of their own land through lawsuits against hundreds of them, all so he could have it all for himself. And you might be asking yourself, don't these pricks feel even a little bit bad about the things that they're doing? Like, do they ever consider the impact that they're having on their communities and on the planet? And the answer is an unequivocal no, because they effectively have brain damage and lack the capacity for empathy. And I'm not saying that, by the way, to be mean. I'm saying that because it is factually true. Studies show that power granted to you by numerous means, including wealth accumulation, it actually has a profoundly negative effect on the human brain. In a 2017 issue of The Atlantic, Jerry Usim writes, the historian Henry Adams was being metaphorical, not medical, when he described power as a sort of tumor that ends by killing the victim's sympathies. But that's not far from where Dasha Kelter, a psychology professor at UC Berkeley, ended up after years of lab and field experiments. Subjects under the influence of power, he found in studies spanning 2 decades, acted as if they had suffered a traumatic brain injury, becoming more impulsive, less risk-aware, and crucially, less adept at seeing things from other people's point of view. Sukhvinder Obhi, a neuroscientist at McMaster University in Ontario, recently described something similar. Unlike Keltner, who studies behaviors, Obhi studies brains, and when he put the heads of the powerful and the not-so-powerful under a transcranial magnetic stimulation machine, he found that power, in fact, impairs a specific neural process, mirroring that may be a cornerstone of empathy. In other words, it's not just that power corrupts, it literally impacts your brain in a plethora of ways. And in a capitalist society, the amount of power you have is directly proportional to the amount of wealth that you have. So if you're a billionaire, that much power fundamentally changes your brain chemistry in a significant way. I mean, just look at Elon Musk, who's on track to be the world's first trillionaire. You can't look at that man and tell me that he's normal, because he is not. Perhaps he behaved like a normal person at some point in his life, but you can see how his brain rot seemed to grow at the same pace as his wealth. So they're never, ever going to think about the pain and suffering that they're causing, because once you accumulate a certain amount of wealth, you just lose your humanity and view life exclusively through the lens of wealth maximization. It's why they have no problem demonizing marginalized minorities and pitting working class people against each other, because they're so detached from the average human being's experience that they can't possibly comprehend the pain and suffering brought about by the things that they're doing. So go back to the start of the video where we talked about the common enemy on the left versus the right. How can anyone with a straight face tell me that immigrants are to blame for all of our problems given everything that we've talked about in today's video? You just can't, right? Which is why Jayapal is right to shift all of the vitriol that's currently being directed at immigrants towards the rich, because they really do deserve all of our scorn. You should also save some of that energy for capitalism itself, since, billionaires are inevitable consequences of that system, which incentivizes greed. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you focus on the wrong 1% and falsely believe that trans people or immigrants or Muslims are the cause of all of your problems, you've been duped by the people responsible for your suffering in the first place. So don't be a useful idiot by attacking minorities. Let go of your bigotry and work with them to disempower elites. Otherwise, nothing will ever get better.